all application forms are only available following a discussion, and we're keen to hear from you what your proposals might be. So if you've got an idea, we look forward to speaking to you, because you're not going to get an application form just by looking at the website. You can see a template one there. That'll give you an indication of what the questions are and what sort of information you might be wanting to collate. But we look to hear from you in advance so that we can have a chat through and work out whether or not we see a potential fit. Because all the programs are unfortunately competitive, simply because we see a lot more applications and interest than we've ever got budget to fund. So that's challenging, but we need to be able to have that chat with you so that we can understand what you're wanting to do and how that might fit in with the pipeline or other stuff that we're doing. Next slide. We can fund all sorts of work, and as we move on to the next slide, we can also fund all sorts of organizations. We cannot fund sole traders or companies, private limited companies, but with shares. We're not able to do that. But KICs, GEOs, companies limited by guarantees, absolutely, we can potentially fund them. Next slide, please. And what can we fund? Well, there's a whole gamut of stuff there that we can fund. Probably easier to say what we can't fund is, and we can't fund individuals at the moment, nor can we fund projects that are supporting the promotion of religious or political views. We can support faith-based organisations that are maybe delivering a community project, but if it's to do with specific promotion of a particular viewpoint, then we're not in a position to fund that. Next slide, please. Common across all the programs that we have, we look for projects to have a good fit with what we call these three approaches. Firstly, that it's strongly community-led. What I mean by community-led, it means that effectively you've done your consultation. You know that this is something that the community wants, and that the community is on board and is looking for this to be delivered for them. Strength-based, you're coming at it from an asset point of view. It's not a question of need, it's a question of, we have these skills locally, or we have this space, or we have this building, we have these assets in our area, and we'd like to use them for the best community purpose possible. And connected, this is one that has become much more important as we worked ourselves through COVID. And that's, how does your organisation connect in with what others may be doing in that particular area? Are you linked in with those organizations? Are you filling a gap? What services are they providing? What are you going to be doing? If there's no gap there, or sorry, if there is a gap there, it's about what you're going to do. How are you going to coordinate your activities together? Next slide. Tell you a wee bit about a couple of the programs, and then we can open it up to a discussion. You may have heard of National Lottery Awards for All. That's a small grants program that we have been running since more or less the lottery opened. Funding of up to £10,000 for a very broad application and a wide remit in terms of groups that can apply. Projects that are based around community type activity, can be startup costs. We can, through Awards for All, support sports and arts-based groups. That's through a partnership with Creative Scotland and Sport Scotland, who are funding partners on the programme. Important point is, very definitely, you must involve your community in the planning and the delivery of your particular activity. You can't just come and say, I've had this cunning idea, I think this would be good for the community, we're going to trial it out. You need to have some basis of understanding that this is something that the community wants and that the community are going to be involved in. Within Awards for All, we have expanded the parameters to provide for a cost of living response in response to the situation that we're all in at the minute. Eligibility, it's the same organisations that are always eligible to apply. What could be applied for? Well, it could be a range of costs. It could include vouchers for food or energy, which may then be onwards distributed. We can consider cash first, but you need to be sure in your own management controls as to how you're going to be able to ensure that that money is spent in the way that it is intended to be spent. As I say, it's up to £10,000. That's over a 12-month period. because of the current situation, traditionally in Awards for All, you would only ever be able to hold one Awards for All grant at any given point. We have relaxed that on the basis that there are a number of groups that are already funded to do some completely unrelated cost of living, unrelated to cost of living activity, but they may well be the best organisation in their local community to help with a cost of living response. We will allow them to hold a second grant if that is considered appropriate. It's an open programme. Yep, Kieran, kicks are fine to apply. We will look at the structure, and there are requirements as far as number of directors, etc. on that, but yeah, kicks are eligible. It's an open program. Decision meetings are monthly. We are aiming to get through the cost of living applications as quickly as we possibly can. It's usually a 12-week turnaround. Most of the stuff has been turned around within 4 weeks at the moment. And there's no deadline at the moment. I can't get away from the fact that the program is heavily oversubscribed. We do see a lot of interest in the program. So it's very much making sure that if you are applying to Awards for All, that you put your best foot forward and you've got the clear evidence in terms of community involvement in both the planning and delivery of your project. Next slide, please. When it comes to larger grants, we have a range of grants in play at the moment. On the thematic side of things, we've got Improving Lives, which is a multi-year programme which can offer funding of up to £200,000. We've got a Cost of Living Support Fund, which we'll come back to in a minute, which has funding up to £75,000. And then there's Young Start, which targets young people aged between 8 and 24. On the community side of things, we've got Community Led, which is a wellbeing programme that can support up to £150,000 over multiple years. And then you've got the Land Fund, which is to do with acquisition of assets. That's a programme that we deliver in partnership with colleagues at Highlands and Islands Enterprise, and that's using government money to support community aspirations to acquire assets. Next slide, please. When it comes to thematic work through Improving Lives, we're looking for projects that support activity around supporting children, young people, families in challenging circumstances. It could be people who've experienced abuse, discrimination, financial hardship, loss, isolation, loneliness. Those are all the thematic targeted areas of Improving Lives. And as I said before, if you want to get an application form, you need to have a discussion with us before. Improving Lives is another programme which is heavily oversubscribed, reflecting the times that we're in. We can't fund everything by a long means, so it's important that you have that discussion with one of my funding colleagues before you start putting pen to paper on your proposal. Next slide, please. The Cost of Living Support Fund is a branch of Improving Lives that we have opened up. That can provide up to £75,000 to a 12-month project. Again, you've got to speak to us first before you can get an application form. Priority has been given to smaller voluntary and community-based organisations that are going to be undertaking activity, which is a direct response to the cost of living crisis and is supporting those that are disproportionately affected by it. It can cover activity costs, training costs, voluntary expenses, overheads, etc. Again, you've got to have the chat. 12 months in terms of the demand, it's massive at the moment. In general terms, I think the average award is round about the £25,000 mark over roughly about 6 months. 75,000 up to 12 months is I've not seen one of those awarded as yet, so it's very much a case of demand management, and awards are being restricted to a kind of a 6-month period, which will hopefully get us over and through the winter period. Next slide, please. When it comes to the community stuff, as I was saying, community-led wellbeing programme, 2 to 3 years. It's going to be strongly locally led, very clear that the consultation, etc., exists, and it's primarily focused on wellbeing activity that can include everyone within the community. So it could be a hall that's looking at delivering activities that will cover mums and tots right the way through to the older members of the community. Common projects that we've seen through community-led would be gardening projects or intergenerational activity in a local hall. And when it comes to ownership of buildings, that's land fund, and that's to address local disadvantage that's been identified there. Next slide, please. So where we are in our cycle at the moment is that we are part of a UK organisation. The Scotland Directorate is part of the Community Fund, which is UK wide, and we're going through a strategic review at the moment, which has been carried out at a UK level. So we have had started the process of developing new programmes, which would cover the next 5, 6, 7 years of National Lottery funding in Scotland. We were due to start that process right about the time when COVID appeared. We shelved that because what happens when we are about to launch new programs, we have to close the existing programs. And what that would have meant was that at a time of particular crisis at the start of COVID, we would have been closed to new applications for the best part of 3 months. And we didn't think that was a particularly good idea to be closed at a time of acute and developing need. We had planned to close our existing programs in October, and we'd made some announcements about that in June of this year. And then the cost of living crisis really started to ramp up. And then same reasoning, if we're closed, is that really the right thing for us to be doing? So new program development has been shelved at the moment. We're not going to be looking at new programs anytime in the near future. By near future, I mean anytime between now and the end of the current financial year. But we hope that in 2023 that we'll be able to get round and we'll start to develop new programs which will be looking at what we might want to be offering to the sector for the next 5 to 7 years going forward. But all these things need to align, and as I say, we've got this acute need at the moment, and we need to be on hand and be able to support activity at the moment. Next slide, please. Various ways to keep in touch with us. You can sign up to the blog page, which posts information on a reasonably regular basis about what's going on, what new funds might be there. There's plenty of how-to guides there in terms of writing a form, etc. Hardship fund is separate. That's the household hardship fund, and I'll tell you a wee bit about that in a minute. Okay, next slide, please. You can also sign up to a monthly e-bulletin. You'll get an email if you register. You'll get an email coming in. Check your spam folders because sometimes we get filtered into there on a reasonably regular basis. But that will give you heads up on what we're doing and what's coming down the line. And we'll also include case studies that you might find interesting or relevant to what you're doing. And next. And finally, other means of keeping in touch. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's telephone numbers, there's emails there. So if you're wanting to get in touch with us, you can come through either my email address at the front or through any of these means here, and we'll direct you to somebody who is going to be able to assist. Okay. That's the kind of the nuts and bolts of the presentation. There was a question there about the Household Hardship Fund. That is separate funding, which we have made available to the Cora Foundation through a grant of £1 million, which the Cora Foundation are administering on our behalf. That's to provide cash and vouchers for individuals who have got the most pressing needs. And that funding is made available to small local community organisations with an income of less than £100,000. That launched yesterday. I'm expecting that programme is going to pause in the not too distant future because we're expecting significant demand and we won't be able to meet all the demand at the present time. So, but it is a separate programme. That kind of concludes my formal bit. I think the slides will be made available to you. The kind of important bits to take from that are the contact details and the fact that we absolutely welcome folk getting in touch with us to have a chat about what your proposals, thoughts are, and we can direct you to the most appropriate person within the team to have a chat with you about that. So
that's brilliant, Dougie. Thank you for that. Really
whistle stop tour
roundup. Yep. So just in terms of the chat, let's have a quick look here. So yeah, as Dougie mentioned, we will share the slides after the session as well. So happy to share those with everybody who booked on, even people who weren't here. So a quick look at the questions. Someone's saying, if we operate nationally, who do we focus on? Sorry, who do we focus our connections with in terms of area team? Our head office is in Glasgow, but we operate in other areas, notably Dundee.
Phone us up and have a chat, and we'll decide where the best fit is. Yep, we do fund some projects that are delivered on a national basis, but as I said earlier, they are not the main focus. But if you're in Glasgow but you're delivering stuff in Dundee, that's fine. Have a chat. I'll probably put you in touch with the Northeast team.
Excellent. There's a question about kicks. Obviously, we did clarify in the presentation that all kicks are eligible for funding. That's correct, isn't it?
But as I say, kicks are eligible, but there are some minimum criteria about 3 directors, unrelated, control, asset lock, and all that sort of stuff. That all needs to be in place.
Okay, that makes sense. And someone's asking, I don't know if we answered this in the presentation, is the hardship fund different to the cost of living or the same thing? So maybe some confusion around that.
Different. So cost of living support fund is a program that we are delivering ourselves. The household hardship fund is technically lottery money, but it's being delivered by Cora Foundation on our behalf. So we've given them a grant of funds to deliver the program, and they'll distribute that, and then but it's entirely separate.
Okay. Quite a lot of questions today, so it's good. Someone's asking, so Elsa's asking, in terms of addressing household poverty activity, which program is the best fit for somebody working with young people?
Probably it could be awards for all, could be cost of living support fund, could be improving lives. Ilse, I think that's probably one to have a chat with your entire way. So Peter would be the best person to pick the phone up and have a chat with.
Okay. Another question. So the cost of living support fund itself, is this only for organizations that have an income of less than 100k? Just a bit of clarification.
Household hardship fund is for organizations that have an income of less than £100,000. Cost of living support fund is technically open to organizations with what any income, some income was always good, of any income. There's no limit on the amount of income, but priority is being given to smaller voluntary and community organizations, but there's no income threshold for that particular program.
Okay, so we do have quite a lot of questions here. Just realized this is great. So in terms of the cost of living support fund again, is it about all the organization's income or just earned income? And so in terms of it being 100k income for the organization, that threshold?
Good question. I think so. That was the household hardship fund rather than the cost of living. So the £100,000 threshold is for the household hardship fund. It is I think it's total income.
We can clarify that at some point, and we can answer questions. That's don't worry.
As I say, Cora administers that'd be a question for Cora, because Cora are delivering the program. And there was a question there about which team is best to contact, local or where the project is based. It would be the area team that covers where the project is based. So it would be that team you'd be wanting to speak to.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that one out. And is it possible to put in more than one application for different programs?
An organisation can hold one open application from a programme at any one time. So you could, in theory, have an awards for all. You could also have an improving lives, a cost of living support, and a community led. If you want to play bingo, you could then shout house. There is a question of spreading the love around and looking at what you're doing and not and making sure that the funding is going around to support as many as possible. You would not be able to have 2 improving lives to be delivered in 2 separate areas. So if you're an organisation that operates on a national basis and you want to deliver something in, say, Glasgow, but also in the borders, you would have to choose which horse to to back. I'm afraid for that you wouldn't be able to hold two at the same time.
Okay. And a question around turnaround time. Someone's asking about the cost of living fund, but I guess other funds as well. It'd be good to just get a bit of a steer on how long people need to wait.
Across all the programs, turnaround times are generally 12 weeks. Cost of living has, in the same way as we dealt with COVID, is being prioritised. So, and again, we're subject to staff availability, sickness and holidays and all the rest of it come into play as well. But we're generally looking at around about the kind of 4 or 5 week mark for the cost of living turnaround. Okay.
So I'm just trying to fire through these very quickly at the moment because there are quite a lot of questions. So the TNL Community Fund website says that the fund will not support payments directly to people for household expenses. Are there any circumstances in which funding may be redistributed to beneficiaries, such as help with transport, school uniforms, etc.?
Within Awards for All at the present time, we're recognising that this is a challenging time within Awards for All at the moment. If you are pursuing a cost of living application, you can apply for funding to support vouchers for food or increased energy or other appropriate costs. So there's potential there. That will not be a forever position. That will change at some point, but for the moment, there is potential for that.
Excellent. So that's all the questions.
But what I would say on that is that the organisation, if you're going to be distributing vouchers or funding in that way, you will have to have very careful management of that and knowing where it's going and what the intended purpose, and keep records for that, because you could well be asked for that information.
Okay, that's good to know, actually, I think. So that's all the questions just from the chat at the moment. So again, if we've missed anything out, we need to get more clarification. Obviously, you can just put your hand up. I see Kieran, you had your hand up. Would you like to come and ask something?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, could I ask just a little bit more clarification on cost of living support? Is it for new projects which are addressing challenges within communities, or can it be to support existing projects which are facing more demand?
I think we look at the activity in isolation. What is the activity supposed to be doing? Is the activity because there is increased demand, or is the activity because that service has not been there and we need to do it? We're seeing a lot of that in connection with kind of warm space type activity, community halls or venues saying, look, we're going to open our doors from, we usually shut it at 2, but we're going to hold ourselves open from 2 till 4 or 2 till 5 or whatever, and we're going to be providing soup, tea or whatever, or we'll have somebody in to provide financial advice or benefits advice during that sort of time. We've seen a lot relating to that sort of thing, so it can be a bit of both, really.
And it wouldn't necessarily be for increased costs of existing services which are delivered within communities.
I mean, it could support increased costs potentially, but you need to say that this is why the increase has taken place. We went through an exercise. I mean, obviously we have existing grant holders, and existing grant holders have been delivering projects for some time. We went through an exercise of looking at their requirements and providing those organisations with an uplift on their existing award, because we'd already entered into an arrangement with them whereby we were funding them to deliver a specific activity, but we recognised that those activities were threatened because of increased costs, and we put in place uplifts to try and help those organisations continue to do what we had funded them to do in the first place.
Brilliant, thanks.
Anybody else got any questions? Like to just unmute and answer the question. We to have like about another 3 or 4 minutes left. If anybody's got anything else. I think someone's just posted something in the chat. I can just read out a question from the chat as well. How can charities be expected to make a meaningful impact on individuals or families struggling with the cost of living if you cannot give them direct financial support? What is the community fund's response to a call by the third sector for cash first approaches?
we're trying to do what we can within the parameters that we've got. There has been a kind of, I suppose, temporary a release, as it were, of the normal strictures that we're operating under to allow a cash first approach through awards for all and through the funding that's been supplied to CORA to deliver the household hardship fund. We are governed by the Act. This is straying into areas where government has a role, but we're doing what we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's a bigger question, a wider question as well for other funders as well. So I think that's something we can certainly look at ourselves as an organisation. Social Enterprise Scotland can look at that for you as well. Anybody else want to ask a question? We've got a couple more minutes left. We can just wrap up there. Again, obviously you can get in touch with me and I can pass on questions to Dougie as well, or you can get in contact with Dougie directly. And as I said, we'll share the slides, of course, as well, so you can get all the contact details. And there are obviously other funds out there as well, so you can go to our support page, which probably needs a bit of an update actually. It's been updated quite a lot, but we need to add some more information to our support page on the website with funding streams, etc. But there's also the Funding Scotland website as well. I think it's just funding.scot is the domain name for that, so that's always worth a look at as well for funding. And that's I think it's run by SCVO, and that's kind of like a general list of lots of funding streams across Scotland that may be available to you. But again, as well, obviously we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, so if you have any issues around that or anything like that, please do get in touch. So that's what we're here for, is to support with that. Elsa, do you want to come in with a question? You're muted. Still muted. There you go. Headset. We've all been there, it's fine. You're muted again. If you want to post something in the chat, maybe you want to do that, feel free. Anybody else want to ask any final questions at this stage? So I've got another minute left. I can fill it with some strange chat while I was just typing. So yeah, Elsa's asking, given that rural areas are more affected by fuel poverty, being off grid, is there any weighting and allocation to take that into account?
Not specifically, but it is certainly something that we are seeing, and we're dealing with a number of organisations in connection with that. So it's one of the many challenges that we're looking at trying to provide some support for.
And again, I think that's a wider issue, so that's something we can certainly look at, and we can have a chat about also maybe as well. I think that's a very, very important point, absolutely. Okay, so we'll wrap up just there. It's 11:40 just now, so we're just at time now for our quick 40-minute session. So thanks for coming along, everybody, today. Really appreciate your engagement as well. Lots of good questions, I think, as well, which is always welcome. We're going through a bit of a strange time yet again at the moment, so we're very, very conscious of this at Social Enterprise Scotland, and as I do get in touch if you need any support with anything. And thanks to Dougie as well. Really appreciate it. And get in touch if you've got any more questions, and have a good day.
Cheers.
Bye bye.